This video is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com. Use the code Kenobi at checkout to get 5% off your order and help support the show. Hello travelers, it's your favourite woke moralist here. It's your boy, PleasantKenobi. In today's video, I want to sit down and take a cold, hard look at some established Commander staples that we might need to examine and ask, why the fuck are we still playing this? In putting together this list, I've been careful not to suggest hugely expensive alternatives, as that kind of thing bugs me too. I'm asking us to examine why we include specific cards and whether or not they've really helped towards us having fun or winning, or sometimes both. That's right, winning isn't a dirty word in this house. I know one or two of them on this list might be a little bit controversial, but that's for the sake of engagement, right? That's not actually true. I do believe the things I'm saying, but I'm looking forward to seeing people pop off in the comments. I don't know if any of them, though, will be as controversial as me saying, play less tap lands, you peasants. Anyway, to afford my dual lands, here's today's sponsor. And then I also have to pay my mortgage and editors for the channel as I progress towards putting more. Anyway, here's the sponsor. Big shout out to Kamikoto for sponsoring this video. Kamikoto knives are some incredibly high quality premium Japanese steel kitchen knives. I like to cook when I have the time, and it cannot be understated how important good knives are to a good time in the kitchen. These knives are made from traditional high quality Japanese steel. Each one is hand inspected and has a lifetime guarantee. Kamikoto even suggests that with a little bit of care, these knives could last generations. They use techniques that are over 800 years old, and they only use Japanese steel sourced from Japanese steel mills. I've always skimped a little on my kitchen knives, and even with a sharpening tool I found I had to replace them every few years. The quality, weight and feel of these is miles above the stuff I normally use. All of their knife sets come with this really suave looking ash wood box set. Like, this isn't just for content creators and people who are sponsored, so it makes a really good looking and swish looking gift or present. I gave it a chop test on some vegetables and some fruit, but I also gave it a chop test on some MTG boosters for a bit of fun. And whilst we can't quite chop or slice right through a booster pack, it did a pretty good job of getting through. Take that, Lewis. Kamikoto have several special offers going on right now and is offering my viewers $50 off any purchase with the discount code Kenobi50. Just head over to kamikoto.com/Kenobi and use the code to take advantage of this awesome deal. Thank you to Kamikoto and their incredible Japanese steel knives for sponsoring this video. Let's start out with the lowest hanging fruit available to us here. This is one that is not new, and many people have spoken about this in the past. I always think of Toma when I think about this and Header Archive, but this is Temple of the Motherfucking False Gods. Why are people still playing this piece of shit? Showing up in 11% of the current decks on EDH Rec, it's a land that rewards you for getting to 5 lands by putting you 1 mana ahead. The payoff though, it's not worth the drama. It's a colourless producing land that sometimes does literally nothing. Nothing, tra-la-la. It can brick opening hands, causing mulligans. It can be turned off by a stray land destruction spell or similar. And sometimes it will just stall your game plan for several turns as you miss a land drop or had a land drop that did literally nothing. Eventually it's online and you're pumped by 1 mana, but it's just not worth the effort because it doesn't deliver enough in the later game to offset the downside in the early game. If you could ensure that you always drew this when you had 5 lands in play, you'd be laughing. But you can't. Why don't you play Ancient Tomb anyway? It's only 700 times the price of Temple of the False Gods. Do you people not have money? Okay, that's the one time I'm gonna do that joke. I promise. You're gonna be waiting for it now all video. What if I don't put it in? What if you're waiting and it never comes? Like the Magic the Gathering content creator equivalent of blue balls. But jokes aside, I think that playing basics and any land that definitely always makes you some form of mana is better than False Gods. You don't need an Ancient Tomb or a City of Traitors or other soul land, as we call them, in order to have this effect. Well, you would, that's not true. You need one of those to have this effect, but I don't think this effect is vital or that important. Next up is a much more controversial, a much more contentious one that people will probably defend in the comment section, and I look forward to it. I look forward to milking your tears and robbing them on my Reliquary Tower. Dick. Having no maximum hand size really isn't the huge power boost that a lot of players seem to think it is. Often a game of Magic is won off the back of a few spells being cast together. Strong synergies and combos, if you will. But even when you assemble a win with interaction and protection, let's say on the turns cycle before you go off, you also fired off an interaction spell, it's not going to require you to have more than 7 cards in hand to piece together this win, unless your combo is fucking terrible. The difference between having 12 cards in hand and having 7 cards in hand isn't actually that big in the grand scheme of things, especially when there's a lot of cards that you just won't be able to play outside of turn anyway. So when you're past your turn and you have to discard them, good riddance to bad rubbish. You weren't casting them anyway. I see a lot of casual sentiment saying there is a decision paralysis element to having to discard down at the end of turn, but in all fairness, having to look through 15 plus cards at each point you can interact isn't exactly speeding up the game either. I really believe this feel-bads of having to discard your cards needs to be overcome. There are stigmas in casual Magic, like discarding to hand size, or discarding in general, or mill, for example, is another one. Things that once you get past them, you become a better player and you improve the environment in which you play Magic. You are a better player to play against. Besides, discarding hand size is often good. It allows you to dump fuel for delve or reanimation targets into the bin. But on a more metatextual level, not actually in with the mechanics of the game, I find that discarding the hand size helps me to establish what cards in my deck are pet cards that probably don't deserve the slot they've got. Things that I should be cutting or changing to improve both the deck itself and its chance to win and the play experience I'm having. Things that rot in hand until, let's say, I discard them to hand size. Some of you will be sat in the comments saying that Reliquary Tower is fine because it is a minimal downside being colorless. And I think that's true if you are a mono-colored deck that wants to draw a lot of cards, maybe mono blue for example. But once you get to 3 colors and up, Reliquary Tower's cost of being a colorless land is real. It is a problem when you want to play other utility cards like Temple of the False Gods or Ancient Tomb. Am I right? I just haven't found any copies of Reliquary Tower when I've put together a couple of decks recently that I played in Orlando and Birmingham and at my local kitchen table downstairs in my living room. It's not far a journey to get some games of Magic in there. And well, I just haven't fucking missed it. People have said as I discarded the hand size, do you not have a Reliquary Tower in the deck? And I'm like, no, I haven't drawn it. And B, there's not one on the deck to draw. But I don't really give a shit. I think Reliquary Tower is legitimately overrated. The next one on the list is a cheaty slot. I've put 2 things into there that are thematically attached, and the 2-for-1 is also part of the theme of the slot. I'm so big brain and clever, I'm basically Vistic Studies. First, let's talk about Negate. Apparently, according to EDH Rec, Negate is the 5th most played mono blue card in Commander, being in 27% of all decks on the website over the last 2 years. And whilst I respect Negate and has been a usable and powerful sideboard card in many a constructed format over the years, I think it's simply too narrow to make the cut. Counterspell is the same CMC, as is Mana Drain at 2 mana. Now, of course, they're both harder to cast at double blue, but honestly, I do feel that counterspells become much stronger in the late game, and if you can't get to 2 blue mana available in your commander deck, then, well, I feel sorry for you, son. I've got 99 problems, but a counterspell ain't one. On the topic of not worrying about counterspells too much, Dovin's Veto is a negate that is uncounterable. It is also more popular than Negate as a card according to EDH Rec, and I understand why. Because sometimes saying no and not having your opponent be able to say no back is incredibly powerful. I am actually shocked so many people were playing Negate when Counterspell and Mana Drain are there. Of course, in lower costs, you've got Offer You Can't Refuse and Swan Song as well, which, although they give the opponent something, at 1 CMC, they are so much better for the most part, allowing you to protect your combo for just 1 mana. I say combo, it could just be a win con. It could be Rafik carrying a Sword of Fire and Ice. That's a combo, right? You want your interaction to be as cheap as possible so you don't have to set up a turn where you've got 9 million mana to try and go for the win or go for a big play. You also want it to be versatile. Negate is not cheaper than the best counterspell ever printed, and it's also not versatile enough in my opinion, because you ain't going to stop that Crater Hoof Behemoth, for example. On that topic, let's talk about Force of Will, a very versatile card, but it's not as good as people think it is. I saw someone recently claiming that Force of Will was a sign that a deck was CEDH because it's a competitive staple. And they're right that it is a competitive staple in Legacy, for example, but Force of Will is really only as good as the thing you're countering. It costs 5 mana for its default mode, which I recommend people try casting it for sometimes. It's worth doing. But the fact that it's a free spell to stop you from losing is pretty good. The problem is the free spell element costs you 2 cards. In a multicolored deck, sometimes you just won't have the second blue card as well. So it's better in decks with less colors in them. But the 2-for-1 also leaves you in quite a poor position, especially if you're 2-for-1ing yourself to stop one player getting ahead or winning, and there's 2 other players at the table. 1-for-1 removal and 1-for-1 counterspells aren't great in the first place in a format where you have 3 opponents, so 2-for-1ing yourself is rough. Of course, doing that instead of losing is better than nothing, but my point is, Force of Will isn't breaking the game. It's not a Gaia's Cradle, it's not a Mana Crypt, fuck, it's not even a Soul Ring. The card is good, but it has this kind of reputation that precedes it, that pushes up to being if someone casts a Force of Will in a game of EDH, people lose their fucking minds. And in reality, if it was cheap as chips, it wouldn't be seen that way. Force of Will is a mainstay in Legacy. It's a powerful commander card, but it is not the competitive ball breaker I see some people claiming it is. On the topic of Legacy staples that I think are played or at least held in too much prestige, let's talk about Brainstorm for a second. This one isn't going to apply to everyone, but it's something that I saw at Command Fest Orlando. Brainstorm is a linchpin in Legacy. It's an incredible piece of card selection. It is not card advantage, of course, it just replaces itself, but it allows you to draw 3 cards and put 2 unusable cards, or cards you don't need right now, back on top of your library. Then you can shuffle them away with a fetch land. You can crack a Secure Tribe Elder, you can cast a Cultivate, you can dig through time to dig through them. There are many ways to manipulate your library to make the card selection of Brainstorm kind of nutty. And Brainstorm, of course, is also good if you're setting up the top of your library as well. Narset or Oracle of Moldiah both benefit from cards like Brainstorm. And in really fringe cases, you can brainstorm things to the back top of your library when someone looks at your hand to cast a spell, or they thought seize you, not that that's a common thing in Commander. But when you don't have any way to do those things, if you aren't looking to set up the top of your library and you don't have that many shuffle effects, Brainstorm becomes a lot worse, like significantly worse. I saw a player at Command Fest Orlando cast a Brainstorm at instant speed in reaction to someone doing something to look for a counter spell. Sure, it's instant speed. I did ask after the game if they had any way to shuffle their deck. I think they were in blue-white, and they said they didn't own any fetches, they weren't playing many tutors, barring like one. They actually struggled to shuffle their deck in any way, so Brainstorm got a lot worse. At that point, there are better spells. I'm not too hot on 1-mana cantrips in EDH in general, but both Ponder and Preordain are better than Brainstorm if you aren't shuffling your deck regularly, and they can still set up the top of your library as well with their effects. Ponder itself allows you to actually shuffle your library, so it actually has an effect to get rid of shit on top of your library if you need to. The last one on the list is probably the most controversial, but it's the most self-reflective on deck building that I've been in recent years. Swords to Plowshares, the de facto best 1-mana white removal spell, right? Well, I don't necessarily agree when it comes to Commander. Now, to explain something here and some rationale for the list, I used to default to, if I was making a white deck, it was Plowshares, Path, Wrath of God, and Suntitan. Suntitan's a pet card, but the other 3 I always thought were just Commander staples. And whilst Wrath still goes into every deck, or at least variants of Wrath, I do think I'm a bit more selective about whether I want to play both of these 1-mana removal spells now. The problem is that Commander cards, like Commanders themselves and staples, have become more powerful over time, and singular permanents now generate huge swaths of mana and card advantage with minimal investment. 1-for-1 trading resources against one of your 3 opponents has become worse now than it ever was, and will only get worse over time. Someone makes 5 treasures off of a Smothering Tithe, they draw 5 cards off of 5 creatures off of Great Henge, which is fueling those creatures by finding them by drawing, and suddenly your 1-for-1 removal at a table of 4 people just seems so bad, as people are generating such value from singular cards they've cast. I think there's always room for a 1-mana clean exile effect, because remember, it doesn't put in the yard, so they aren't reanimating it. Similar to how I defend 1-mana counter spells over Negate, for example, keeping a 1-mana up whilst developing your board state is a much easier endeavour than keeping up more than 1. Obvious statement, I guess. For example, you can tap out for a Commander Sphere and still hold up Path or Swansong. And that's right, I said Path because I think I prefer Path in Commander now. But beyond Path, which I'm going to come to more in a moment, I think Mass Removal, Wrath Effects, and Versatile Removal, like Generous Gift, or if the colours allow it, Assassin's Trophy or Chaos Warp over Plowshares, because they hit things like Smothering Tithe, the Great Henge or Gaia's Cradle, things that Plowshares can't. And then going back to the Path thing, I think someone getting a land in the long term is so much better for them than the life. I agree, but there are 2 reasons I think this effect is better. Firstly, I've seen 2 different games recently where the game devolved into arch enemy. One of them, one of the opponents was dead, so it was just 2 players trying to beat the other player. And they were playing, I think it was Bruna might have been the deck. All I remember is that we were trying to kill them, and the only interaction one of us had was a Swords to Plowshares, and that actually gained them like 10 life, I think it was, for killing their smallest creature. At that point, we couldn't actually kill them with a collective combat math on board. And that frustrates me because sometimes to beat an insurmountable board state, you just have to race them. You just have to delete the player as opposed to permanents in play. Secondly, I've also been known to path my own creature in an end step to then untap and cast a game-winning or back-breaking spell like an Eerie Ultimatum or Tragic Arrogance. The utility of Path shouldn't be ignored. So for that reason, I play Path to Exile on all of my white decks, and Plowshares sometimes makes it, although I might cut it for a more versatile removal spell, something that can hit every problem permanent type if possible. Generous Gift is a good Magic card. The 3/3 Elephant is rarely that relevant in Commander. I'm sorry, Reed Duke, but the 3/3 Elephant doesn't matter in the grand scheme of Tulanes, Great Henges, and Tegrits. So what do you think? Do you reckon my list was too contentious? Do you think that Swords to Plowshares is always better than Path? Well, you can think that and casting my Eerie Ultimatum after pathing one of my tokens if you want, but I'll be winning the game. Either way, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Smash that like button, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you all soon. Ta-ta for now.